How's it going, YouTube? My name is LBNinja7, your favorite WoW healing YouTuber and your resident Mistweaver monk. And guys, today I want to make a very quick video talking about a major barrier that the WoW developers have kind of crossed or broken down in terms of how they balance certain healers. And I wanted to talk about some implications or different applications of this barrier being broken down and why it's actually kind of a big deal and no one's talking about it. So for some time, I've been really asking for the dev team to look into different spells and balance them differently according to raid versus Mythic Plus healing, because those are different forms of content. Thus, they deserve different forms of balancing. And I've heard other WoW content creators say this. I think I've heard Mad Skills say it in one video, and then also Jack. I hear him say this all the time. But they finally did it. They've done it in the past a little bit, but this was like one of the biggest examples of this happening. So Atonement, this is for Disc Priest, by the way, and this will come in 10.2. Atonement now heals for 32% of the damage. It was 32%. You were not seeing Disc Priests at all in Raid. You were seeing them a little bit in Mythic Plus, but then they buffed it up to 40%, and then you were seeing them all over in Raid, all over in Mythic Plus, because it was just very strong, because this minor tweak is just, it's massive in terms of Raid, their Raid healing, but then now they're nerfing it back down to 32%. So why are we talking about this? Well, it's actually this next line that is important. So Atonement healing is now increased by 50% while not in raid. So we saw that when they tweaked this slight variable, their raid numbers went kind of through the roof. I mean, they weren't like at the top of the HPS charts, but just this slight tweak, just buffing their atonement healing by 8%, which is technically like buffing this one major source of healing by 25%. It just impacted their raid healing a lot more than it impacted their Mythic Plus healing. And this just goes back to these things should be balanced differently because these forms of content behave differently. So what are we talking about here, and how does this impact other healers? Well, I'm sure regardless of whatever heal class you main, there is a great example of one spell or talent or ability that is just like a godsend in, like, say, Mythic Plus, but you don't even touch it in raiding. And it's just because these things are balanced differently. Now, why is that? Well, there's a couple of different variables. The two most obvious variables are just how many targets. So if I cast an AoE spell, I'm gonna get a lot of value in raid, whereas in Mythic Plus, they don't want you to get a lot of value, because an AoE spell, if it chunked your health bars, it would top up your entire Mythic Plus group, whereas in Raid, it would not top up the entire raid. It would just do like a quarter of the raid. One great example here is Resto Shaman. For a while in Dragonflight, we saw a big buff to Resto Shamans. I don't exactly remember the numbers, but all I remember was for about a week or two, Shaman was flavor of the month by far, because they buffed things like High Tide, or maybe they didn't change High Tide, but they buffed talents like High Tide that buff your chain heals. Now, why was this disgusting? Well, it's exactly like I just said. A chain heal hits your entire Mythic Plus group, especially if you're all stacked, but in Raid, it does not hit your entire Raid group. So if it's a good enough cooldown to press in Raid, and it can top up or do a big chunk heal to 5 different people, in Mythic Plus, that means it's basically a raid cooldown, and that's exactly what it was. Your chain heal was basically like a cooldown. It was like a convoke or a divine toll. It would top up your entire group. I think people were calling it like the machine gun build. You would just wait until you had both of your chain heal talents stacked up, and then you would just pop 2 chain heals, your group was topped up. And that's not even without pressing like Ascendance or any of your major buttons. That's literally just your chain heal that is not on a cooldown. So this is why there's a big balancing issue with like different AoE heal spells and like different single target heal spells. But like I said, every healer spec has great examples. Let's just jump into some other ones. So Holy Paladin, they have basically 2 spenders for their holy power, 2 that heal. One of them is Word of Glory. It's just a single target, big shock heal. It does a ton of healing to a single target. So you'll see that used basically almost every single time to spend your holy power on in Mythic Plus. Because if you top up one person completely with one button, you're doing 20% of the required healing, because you're healing 20% of the health bars that need healing. Now, obviously, the numbers are different, but if you think of it, you're topping up 1/5 of your party in Mythic Plus. Whereas if you press Word of Glory in Raid and it tops up one person, you're doing 5% of the healing required. You're only healing 5% of your raid group because you're healing 1/20th of the group. So it's just very less impactful in terms of like overall HPS. So what you see is in Raid, people basically only press Light of Dawn. Now you'll see top end raiders press Word of Glory a lot more because shock healing can save one person, and it's better in a lot of cases. But in like the average guild, the heroic, the AOTC guild, you will see Holy Paladins just spam Light of Dawn trying to push their HPS higher. And I mean, you can't blame them. It's just an AoE heal. If you can hit 5 targets with this, you're going to do just more throughput with this button than a Word of Glory. Whereas in Mythic Plus, this just is not as worth it as doing that shock heal because you're healing, you are fully topping up 1/5 of your party for basically free, and then your holy shocks can basically do the rest of the carrying. But let's move on to another thing, and this is kind of the talk of the town right now, and that is Resto Druid. Man, their flourish got gutted. This, if you don't play Druid, this basically, it's if you have a bunch of hots out and you press flourish, every hot that you have out will be extended and start ticking faster. So it basically makes them last. Well, it doesn't technically make them last longer. It can, but it makes them just get a lot more healing, and it makes them tick very fast. So you're getting more healing all at once during this 8 seconds, but they basically just gutted this. A good example of this effect, doing this Disc Priest balancing effect, could have been like, yeah, they could have nerfed Flourish in Raid. They could have just said it does the effects faster or less fast in Raid, but in Mythic Plus, this button's staying the same. And then that way, the Mythic Plus druids wouldn't be screwed over because the Raid counterpart that can get 100 hots out and then press flourish and then get so much value out of it, get like 800k HPS, they're not destroying the button for the Mythic Plusers. But that's kind of like the easy examples, just picking some of the easy ones off the top. I'm sure you guys can let me know some easier ones down below, or some more like niche scenarios where buttons are just used in Mythic Plus or used in Raid and then not vice versa. But there's another big one, and this one impacts me since I am a Mistweaver player. And not only in Raid do you have more allies to heal, but in Mythic Plus you have more enemies to heal. So things that work off of damage. So like I said, Atonement gets this buff where now all of a sudden it does more healing in basically Mythic Plus. Yeah, it says not in Raid, but in Mythic Plus, if we're just looking at Raid and Mythic Plus, it's doing more healing. You're doing more healing based off the damage you do. In Mythic Plus, the variable is not how many allies you have to hit. That kind of determines which spells can perform better, just are more impactful, more efficient to press. But now, all of a sudden, you have to think about how many enemies do I have to hit. So when you have things like Atonement and, in Mistweaver's case, Ancient Teachings or Awaken Phalanx, these buttons that do healing based on how much damage you do, all of a sudden, you basically are forced to take these. Like, you will, if you're a Mistweaver player, you are forced to take these buttons or these talents in Mythic Plus because they just perform better there. They just do more healing. So you'll see Mistweavers, if you ever come across a Mistweaver in Mythic Plus, you'll see them do most of their healing with Ancient Teachings in Mythic Plus, and then if not Ancient Teachings, it's going to be Awaken Phalanx, just because they're doing a lot of their healing based on their damage that they're doing. But why is this an issue? Why is this an issue? Well, I'm basically saying it's performing as intended in Mythic Plus. But when's the last time that you saw a Mistweaver, well, I could stop there, but when's the last time you saw a Mistweaver take these talents in Raid? It's been a while because Ancient Teachings has been scaled down so much. They really don't want to break Ancient Teachings in Mythic Plus, make it just super powerful in order to get it viable in Raid again, because it just underperforms in Raid compared to its counterpart, which you can't see it right now, but it's Clouded Focus. You always see Mistweavers take Clouded Focus in Raid because it just gives you way more healing than Ancient Teachings. But what should they do here? Well, I believe this treatment should go vice versa. Now, Disc Priest is kind of like the opposite side of the same coin. If you buff Atonement for the Mythic Plus crowd, it's going to just shoot the Raid crowd through the roof. But if you buff for Mistweavers, Ancient Teachings or Awaken Phalanx, but basically Ancient Teachings, if you buff this for the Raid crowd, it's going to shoot the Mythic Plus through the roof. Now, in both of these scenarios, like I said, I say through the roof, not compared to other healers, just compared to their current self. But this could be a major implication for abilities like Ancient Teachings, like Chain Heal. This atonement change could be the first domino to fall in a long line of dominoes that kind of split up the raid healing balancing between raid and Mythic Plus. And like I said, I do think that Ancient Teachings could see a buff in raiding, and it could become more viable and people could play it and not be memed on or feel like they're just taking a bad talent or the worse alternative, and not be affected in Mythic Plus. They could not change the number of Mythic Plus, and we would just see a better game. WoW as a whole, at least for healers, would look better because now all of a sudden they have opened up the door to balancing things between Raid and Mythic Plus, and we have been asking for it. Now, it's a shame it's on Priest, because one issue I've noticed is, well, it's not a shame it's on Priest. Let me clarify. It's a shame it's just on Priest, because I think the Priests has such a large player base and large content creators that are big voices in the community and can ask for these things and it actually happen. Like the splitting of healing in Raid and Mythic Plus, or the splitting and balancing in Raid and Mythic Plus. But us Mistweavers, we're kind of left high and dry. Now, I'm going to use Mistweaver as an example because that's just what I play and what I know most, but you can apply this concept to any healer that you play. So the idea is shoehorning or pigeonholing. I think those are the correct terms, but basically it's the idea that you have a lot of options, but there's really only one choice. We're getting pushed through this tiny little hole, and this is the correct choice that you're supposed to take. So picture it, you're at a candy store, you see shelves full of candy, all of them look so good, but they're all $100. The only one that's $1 is an Almond Joy. It's like, yeah, you do have options. You could buy a Payday for $100, but really, is your mom going to let you do that? No, you have to get the Almond Joy. If you like Almond Joys, I'm so sorry. I do not like those, so I just use those as the example. But anyways, a good example here is this is like the Mythic Plus talent tree that we take most of the time as Mistweavers. You have this whole talent tree. Sure, you could take any of these grayed out talents if you wanted to, but you just will not perform as well, because these are just so strong. Ancient Teachings, Awaken, Phaeline, these just do so much healing and so much work, so much passive healing in Mythic Plus that you're kind of memeing, unfortunately, if you don't take them. So what could they do? They could buff some of the other talents like Tear of Morning, which is hidden behind Rising Mist right now, or Cloud of Focus. Cloud of Focus, you guys see how broken it is in Raid. Not broken, but like strong it is in Raid, that it just got nerfed. But like in Mythic Plus, you don't take it because then you'd be sacrificing Ancient Teachings. But you're basically, that's the thing, is you're sacrificing these better things, these clearly better things, in order to take the other option. So the opportunity cost is way too high to take anything other than what's the single build. You only have one build per content, and that's it. The same thing goes for the raid build. So Cloud of Focus, if you take Ancient Teachings here, you're just missing out. You are cutting yourself out of throughput. But what I'm trying to say is they should change these spells, or buff Ancient Teachings and the Phaeline spells, or just using these as an example, in Raid. Make the numbers different in Raid than what they are in Mythic Plus, just like they just did with Atonement. And then that way, now you actually do have an option. You could full-on fist weave, full fist weave, like every button, a damage button, if you wanted to in Raid, and still put up like fine numbers if they did that. Or you could just play the current playstyle. Like, yeah, they don't have to be the exact same, but if it was like, if the Ancient Teachings build, if it performed like 95% of its power of the Cloud of Focus build, so like Cloud of Focus is 100% power, but Ancient Teachings is like 95% power, then people would take that. People enjoy the Ancient Teachings playstyle more, and some people would take that option. But currently, the gap is way too different, way too large, that you will not see people make those sacrifices in order to play what they want to play. And it all comes down to, these numbers are exactly the same in Raid as they are in Mythic Plus, and thus you just see them perform better in one form of content than the other. So here we are, we've circled all the way back. Give them the Atonement treatment. You guys finally did it. If you're a dev watching this, you finally did it. We've been asking for things like this, and Atonement was a great start. It is another great example of this this phenomenon. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just a great example. Now listen to the rest of us healers. Hopefully they're all letting us know down below in the comments what other abilities could receive a similar treatment. We play the game, we love these healers, and we want to see all of them succeed. I don't just want to see Mistweaver succeed and be fun and engaging and have plenty of options. I want the same for Holy Paladins, believe it or not. Holy Priest, Disc Priest, Resto Shaman, Preservation Evoker. I want every healer to just have plenty of options that you can choose from, different builds that all perform on a similar level in all forms of content. And I just want the game to be as fun as possible and for the player base to enjoy it as much as possible. But things like this, where you have one build, Mistweaver is just such a great example. You have one build in Raid and one build in Mythic Plus, anything else, and you're just being suboptimal. You're like accepting that loss for your own enjoyment, and that's just, I don't know. It's just, it feels wrong. It feels like it should not work like that, especially when other classes are receiving a treatment like this, which, I mean, it's not, they use Atonement in Mythic Plus and rating. It's just, it performs differently in both forms of content. So that's going to do it for this video. It was very long-winded. I said it would be a shorter video, and I think it still was. But guys, I am going to go test more healers on the PTR. The raid is out for us to test right now. It's coming up in just a couple minutes, 8 minutes actually. I'm going to try to kill the 3rd and 4th boss and get a lot of information for you guys. Now stay tuned if you want more updates on how different healers are performing on the PTR, or if you just want a lot of Mistweaver updates. This is the perfect channel for you guys. So make sure that you guys are subscribed, because I am busting my butt for content, trying to get you guys as much information as possible. So thank you so much for all of my supporters, my Patreons. They are currently on the screen now. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. You guys make this channel possible. And if you want to join their name on the screen here, then check out my Patreon. The link is down in the description below. While you're down there, check out my Twitch link. I don't go live often, so make sure you go follow over there so you're notified as soon as I go live. Other than that, there are plenty of cost-free ways to support my channel, and you guys have been killing those options lately. Obviously, subscribing is the best way to do so. Liking my video is really a good way to get around the algorithm, or to push my content further into more people's homepages so that they can see my content and give me exposure. So make sure and hit that button. And then, like I said, let's have a good discussion down below, because I feel like there are a lot of different buttons or talents or abilities, whatever you want to call it, that could receive a similar treatment. And I want to hear what all of those could be down in the comments below. But thank you guys once again so much for all of the support lately. And I appreciate each and every single one of you for clicking on my video, because I know there's a ton of content on YouTube. But once again, that's going to do it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until next time, take care.